Dee Dee would remember. We had the fences program, remember? And at that time, there was a program put down to the auditorium in regard to that fences program. And that's where I first saw this gentleman perform. And I only remember you were there and Jan Swan. You're the only two people I can remember that were there. And from then on, I've been a fan. And so I was really tickled when he was willing to come in and do our program today.
Come on, tell them why I'm doing it. What am I getting out of it?
No, because then I'll have to do it for somebody else.
You don't have to babysit the grandkids today, that's what
one
you're
of
getting
the
out of it.
Yes, yeah, that's good, see. All right, good. Anyway, Robert Dennis was born in Switzerland many years ago. Because of Dr. Massa's wife, he was one of many who were lucky enough to be adopted and come to America to Roy and Dorothy Dennis, who could not have had children of their own. He grew up on the Dennis Ranch, established by his grandfather at the turn of the century. Though not genetically related to those who raised him, he is a product of their ideas and training and love. He and his family continue to operate Dennis Ranch today. Robert plays the guitar, singing old and new songs, both standard and his own writing. He also writes and recites cowboy poetry and a weekly column for the Belfouche Bee newspaper. He builds saddles and does leather work in his spare time. He thinks the only worthwhile improvements in the past 100 years is indoor plumbing and the internet. Robert loves history and has studied it all his life, particularly to the ranching and cowboy life. Please help welcome Jingle Bob Dennis.
Thank you. You know, they start with pictures and said college, but that pretty well covers it. Dr. Massa's wife went to Switzerland in the 50s, and she found all these white kids that were available for adoption. And I don't remember if there were 24 or 26 of us that came to this area. But the interesting thing to me is the lady who kind of arranged for our adoption, and we would go see her. She lived in Deadwood when she got old. It was Agnes. And there were 5 of us in the family, all siblings. And 3 of us came to Mom and Dad. And the oldest son came, Van. And then in between him and my sister Mary Ann, there was another girl who went to Rapid City to a couple. And we all played together as kids. And then the youngest one ended up staying with our birth mother in Switzerland. And then our sisters found us when I was 18, and we've since gotten together. And it's strange because they're not like sisters so much as cousins. You know you're related to them, but you don't have a lot of common ancestry. But it is, I think they should do a study on us, because out of the 5 of us, we were all tobacco users. We were raised in different environments and things like that. You know, the similarities and dissimilarities. I was 10 and a half months old when I came. My sister said back here, we came at the same time. She was 2. I find it interesting that I am much more a product of my environment than my older brother and sister were, who were both 2. They still seem more European of their thoughts and many things. And I mean, anybody that knew my parents would tell you I'm running Dorothy's son. I do so many things. Matter of fact, my wife tears her hair. I'm a pack rat like my mother, and crabby like my dad. I'm not a grandpa, I'm a grandpa now. We have 2 sons on the ranch with us. Our oldest son is a Catholic priest in Martin. Our middle son has a locker plant in Newell now. He has 8 children from 17 to 1. We think they're done. Good Catholics. My other son, Chance, is on the ranch, and him and I are pretty much the day-to-day. And then him and his wife divorced 2 years ago, so his 3 kids are there about half the time. But I call all my grandchildren my run hunters. That's who does help me a lot. A couple of years ago, we had a lot of pink eye and foot rot, and we had cattle in 2 different bunches. And we'd get one bunch in, and I would rope any calf that needed doctored, usually 10 to 20, and the kids would doctor them after Grandpa roped them. And then the cows we would sort off, we'd run them and shoot. And we'd do one bunch one day, and then 3 or 4 days later, we'd get the other bunch in and do them, and we did that all summer long. So they got a lot of grandpa time. My grandfather left Iowa when he was 16, and he ended up in northeastern Colorado. He worked for a farmer down there for about 6 months and didn't like the country. And his sister, Ona, who I think was the first dentist to come here, had married an old cowboy named John Timmons. That's John and their daughter Ruth at their place. And some of you may have known the place that they originally had later on was sold, and they called it the Baldwin place. It is now belongs to Kmats, and Kmats run Buffalo up there. A really cool place sitting down there. But anyway, so being his grandpa had a sister up here, he must have came to see her and then just stayed. And he worked for different outfits. His beginning as a rancher, him and this gentleman were out riding one day, and they found 2 slick heifers, which is something with no brand. And they were no longer calves, they weren't following a cow, so they belonged to anybody that could catch them. And John told my grandpa, he said, Walt, he said, if you would register Brandon, you'd have the start of a herd. So grandpa in 1902 registered the B/4 brand, and we still got it to this day and still use it. So you could, grandpa wasn't quite a cow thief, but it was legal, but might have been frowned upon. And then later on, when Dad, and so I should start using some pictures. So, this is Walter, good-looking young feller. This is him and Grandma, and that is their wedding photo or whatever. She had a homestead 12 miles west over south of Fairpoint. And she was a Bauer who came from Illinois, and a bunch of, almost all of her family moved out here, left Iowa and moved out here, Illinois. Grandpa would ride 12 miles over there. I don't know if she had her own horse or he took one, but then they would ride, I'm sure they didn't have a buggy, they would ride to Fox Ridge, about 30 miles away, cross country, and go to a dance, and dance all night. And at daylight they'd eat breakfast and they would ride home. And he'd take her home and he'd take her home. And when they got married, the first thing he did is he traded her quarter section with the county for a quarter section to join them, because she was on gumbo and we're on sandy gravel, you know, so it's like 3 times better ground. Grandpa, he was stupid. But anyway, he ran sheep, and at the, how many of you know where Stoneville is?
Yeah.
Well,
That's a good one. Good choice.
That is the Stoneville coal mine. Grandpa was also pretty tight with a nickel. So you could go up there and buy coal, or for less money, you could mine your own out. Well, guess how Grandpa. So here he is in the mine, and he is getting his coal to heat the house. I'll just show you some of these older photographs that they'll show. The gentleman on this side, that's my grandfather. Clear on over on the far side, that would be his brother-in-law married his wife's sister, Grant Boyer. They left the country. Don't have the picture with me, I didn't put it in here. But anyway, Grandma and her sister homesteaded together, but the sister was too young, so she never did get a quarter section. Grandpa's brother followed him out here, and that is the first thrashing machine in that country, and that was the Dennis Brothers thrashing machine. And last I knew, it still sat at Harley Rounds'. And I at times thought about going and buying it and bringing it, but I wasn't. He had 2 or 3 sitting there, and I wasn't sure which was which. But as bad as I hate farming, I don't know why I want anything to do with farming. I did pitch my share of bundles of alfalfa seed through an old thrashing machine like that. Here's another picture of it. I should have, in this picture, I don't know if you can make him out. So, after the Dennis kids moved to this country, the old folks, great-grandpa and his wife, and that would be great-grandpa in the center, he was a Civil War veteran. He had joined the Union Army supposedly when he was 17 years old as a wagon master. And I've tried to find and look that up. I can't find much information that really tells me much. I found 4 guys with the same name that all served in the Civil War, and I don't know which one was great-grandpa for sure. I followed the line back that made the most sense, but anyway, so evidently he was a stonemason, so he went wherever the work was, so all the children were born in a different place. Like the oldest one was born in Lawrence, Kansas, Anona. And Grandpa, I was always told, was born in northern Missouri, but the records don't show that. So I don't know where he was born, but I know he came from Alaska, Iowa, that's where they were living. But anyway, once the kids all got out here, great-grandpa and grandma were probably somewhere in their 50s. They loaded up the wagon with a team, one stood this high, one stood this high, deck and dam, and drove them out here. And then he got, I think any Civil War veteran could get 80 acres free and clear, no charge, if you were a Civil War veteran. So where Grandpa's homestead and where great-grandpa's was and my grandpa's brother, that is a correction line on 2 sides, so what is supposed to be a section, there's actually only 500 and some acres instead of 640. But anyway, Grandpa ended up with a 60-acre plot there, and it was just basically retirement. He did help build a few of the rock buildings that are out in our country, but we don't know which ones for sure. One of them we do know was the Stewart place where John Miller now lives, and that burnt down, I don't remember how many years ago that was, and John and his wife at that time, they built a log cabin. Grandpa had worked at the Stewart place, so that's why. But anyway, so when he got married and homesteaded, this is, oh, I can look right here. So this would be the little tow head on the end. That's my dad, Roy. And that's probably one of the Lowders, or one of the Gleasons. The Gleasons were just a mile to the east, and Grandpa and Grandma had 3 sons, and they had 3 sons, and they were all the same age. So those 3 boys were great pals. And Dad talked about they would take their sleds and walk over there and sled way into the night, or they would come to our house and sled. And he said, you know, we probably froze our fingers and toes, but your kids, cold, kids don't mind cold. A little tougher generation. So here's some pictures my grandmother had, I think was a Brownie camera, a little box camera. And I ran across some negatives some years back, and you couldn't hardly see them, but I took them in and got them all developed, and it was wonderful. So can you see that plain enough? You probably can't. Something about the light. There's a little kid on there driving that wagon with no box on it, and wearing a dress and a hat. Did you know that boys wore dresses until they were a certain age in those days? So I thought that was interesting. I don't know, maybe these won't show up on here. There we go. So that would be Grandpa and Uncle Harry and my dad, Harry being the older. And that's probably Dad, or Grandpa's whole team. And Dad said that his first team that he remembered was Queen and Floss, and then Queen had a colt. They named it Bell, and Queen and Bell, and that was Grandpa's old team that he said they probably worked 364 days a year. They probably got Christmas Day off. But up the creek where Grandpa had all of his hay ground would be about a mile, and there was 2 creek crossings to navigate coming back, and Grandpa always had to have 100 stacks of hay, wagon loads of hay sitting at the barn. And so they would go up there and they would pitch a load on, and they would take another team that was bronchier. So they would load the gentler teams first, and they'd tie up the lines and send them home, and then they would fill the other one coming. When they got home, that team would be standing there waiting. And when Dad first told me that, I thought he was stretching the blanket a little bit. Well, then when I got using a team of horses, and I found out how automatic they get, it is flat amazing. My sister sitting in the back was at home with this one winter, and they had dance lessons. And I had a fairly wide bed on a set of runners. It was one of the few years I got to use a bobsled very much, and a team. And every day I would go up and pitch on a load of hay, feed the cows. And so they had these dance lessons. So she and I'd tie the lines up, and those horses would jog up there all on their own while we practiced dancing on that. So when Dad said they did that, I believe they did. So are any of you, I won't even tell you what this is. How many of you know what that is? Overshot stacker. That's my grandpa on there. In the far distances, either Grandpa, my dad, or his brother driving the team. And Dad said the first team that he ever drove was a stacker team. And Great-Grandpa and Grandma's team was Deck and Dan, and one was big and one was little. But he said the little one walked really fast, and the big one walked really slow, so they were perfectly matched. But when you pulled that hay up, so the team walks away and that picks that up, and he said if you hit it harder, it threw a little further. And if you didn't want it as far, you didn't hit it as hard. Well, he said them old horses got smart. And just when they got to the end, they'd ease into it. He said that hay would fall down, and Grandpa would just raise hell with it. So then the next time, you'd be on top, well, then you'd throw hay almost off the other side. And some people talked about they had teams that would do that on their own just by voice command. Those horses, they didn't even need a driver. But probably these didn't need much. But I think that's Deck and Dan.
Before you get too far, if I can interrupt for a second, I've seen those around, but I've never seen them work. Tell me, how does that happen?
Okay, so there's a frame. This is a framework all right here. It stops right here. This here you can see is on the ground. These horses have a buck rake, which is just a square contraption with a head on the front that's got a bunch of long wooden teeth, and that's called a buck rake. And so you'd go down the windrow and you'd fill that. And normally, when we did it with the farmhand, you'd set those. You'd go out to a field and you'd make all these little bucker bunches. Then you'd go back and you'd stack them later. So once you get here, these horses would drive up. Along the front of this is a set of teeth also. And it's got a tilting head. And gravity will make it drop down like this. And then once it comes up to this position, you can see it's come up. You can see the long teeth here, and the short teeth here, and there's a set of springs down here, and a rope that went around and off to the distance for, as they walked off to the side, and that's what brought that up. It just tilted up like this. And like I said, if you hit it pretty hard, it would throw the hay a little further. And if you hit it soft, it would just drop right there. And so he's up there with a pitchfork, and he's pitching that hay all around. When you stack hay, I learned this from stacking loose hay on my wagon bed, you don't worry about the middle. You take care of the corner. And if you do it right and get this all topped off, it will actually shed water. Nobody puts up loose hay hardly at all anymore. It's just, I don't know why for sure, other than I remember bending teeth and my dad screaming and hollering. And Bader, you can just go so much faster in bale hay than you can now. That was at one time a much cheaper system, but anymore it's not. So here's a gentleman, before the boys got big enough to do everything, that's Lloyd Finley, and he was a neighbor. He worked for my granddad off and on. And Grandpa would never keep a horse in the corral at night. He would keep one horse up to wrangle and the other horses in the pasture. Well, they couldn't do anything until they had the horses in their teams. So Floyd would go out every morning, and he had served in World War I, and he had an old 1911 Colt that he carried all the time. And Dad said, while they were eating breakfast, Floyd would be already been there, got a saddle horse, brought the horses in, come to the house while they were eating breakfast. And every morning he'd say, boy, should have seen that old dog coyote I see. He said, I pulled down on him, should have seen the hair fly, didn't get him. He always claimed he hit the coyote. He said he never did bring one in. And in those days, at that time, the only thing that was in that country were antelope and coyotes and jackrabbits. There were no deer to speak of, or anything else, or fox. And then through the years, as people started trapping and poisoning, and the game laws, I suppose, would come in. And Vern Simons told a great story about seeing an elk for the first time, and he didn't even know what it was. It came through that country. And they took him chasing. Then eventually, somebody did get him and put him in the freezer. But I won't say who. It's the relative. Okay. So that is one of Grandpa's old horses that his three sons sitting on him. In the background are cottonwood trees. Those cottonwood trees are all pretty much there. My granddad, they did their business like ship cattle and stuff to Wasta, 50 miles away. And Grandpa took a team and wagon down that country. And on the way back, he stopped along the river. I imagine camped overnight on the bell or whatever. And the next morning, he had the ground all worked. And he took and threw a little wet sand in his wagon box and then pulled these little saplings out and threw wet sand over the top of them and drove home. When he got home, he planted them. And if they were irrigated, it would have been with buckets, and they might have been. Grandpa, that would have been a job for boys, and he had three of them. But almost all of them, well, I shouldn't say that. All of them lived that first year. And over the years, they got quite a great, huge thing, and they're now, so this was about 1920 when this happened. So they're over 100 years old, and I found out that cottonwoods, most cottonwoods do not live past 100 years old. And there's still quite a few of them, but we're losing them all the time. And I'm like my grandfather, I've planted thousands of trees. Not all of them grew. So back in those days, if you wanted to have fun, you saddled up and you went to the neighbors. And you can't maybe see it very good, but these guys all got their good Sunday clothes on. And I've got several others of a claim shack. And the old claim shack, and then they would put sod up on the sidewalls to help insulate it better. And you know, the claim shacks, they were just rough boards with tar paper over them. I can't even imagine what they were like for cold and heat. But I bet them people wore a lot more clothes in their house than we do. Now, when I told you how good our ground is compared to the gumbo, this is the kind of watermelon my dad could raise.
Oh my God, good gravy.
He was always pretty proud of that.
That's believable.
That's crazy.
So here
I
is
always
the
love that
family.
picture. I just love it. What a sense of humor.
That would be Walter and Libby and Wayne the baby, Dad in the middle and Gary. Wayne was a dance collar, square dance collar, lived in originally at Guilford, and where the overpass is now, they had a store there. And that's now six. Partially, they bought them out when they put that overpass. We moved to Rapid City. I've got, how's that time, Lonnie? I'm going to go through so many pictures. So look at there.
Love that picture.
I don't know what year that would be taken, but that was Mrs. Bray. That was the grandmother of my grandfather. So I don't know, well, it must have been paternal. So her daughter must have married my great-grandfather. We talked about stuff. I just like to wake up in the morning and look at that. We've got a picture of my grandmother that I don't have it with me.
That looks like.
That, she's a little older and everything isn't in place, and she looks so much like the woman that played the Wicked Witch on Wizard of Oz. And I said that to my dad one time, and I thought he was gonna hit me. My mother was not on me. All right, so you said about 20 minutes of that.
Yeah.
So before I go into the music and stuff, why don't we just have a little questions and answer, if anybody's got any questions so far.
I wondered, you talked about the coal mine in Stoneville, was that
Yep.
where it was? Is that still there? I mean,
The hole is, there
But
used
there's,
to be
the
a
coal is
building.
gone?
There's an old stone building, small, that I think was their powder shack that still sits there. And we went up there quite a few years ago now and kind of tried to look for the mine, and I think they've got it something, you know, fenced off so livestock and stuff couldn't fall and couldn't really see it. It would be interesting to see if you could still go and look, and there's a lot of coal things in that country. There's another picture I had, I was going to show you, of the coal mines.
How you guys doing?
I've got quite a few pictures.
Our brother.
Here we go. I don't know if this will show up at all. So this is just off the north end of our property. And this is Red Owl Creek that runs here. This was a school section. And you can see this whole side bank, you see these strips in here?
Yeah.
Well, that was coal. And we call it coal mines. And when you go there, you don't want to go when the snakes are coming out or when the snakes are leaving, because there's a lot of them. But I've taken a lot of people and children to them, but you can't see it very good, but in the picture down here, they must have a picnic because these ladies, they're sitting in these wagons in their best dresses and stuff. But those guys would go, and like here you can see where some is tippled down, but the coal is really poor quality.
Oh.
We've got a side hill where there's an outcropping that's more like a shale, and in the summertime, the horses are in that pasture. When the flies are bad, they'll go stand and stomp, and that coal dust will get on those horses and help keep the flies and stuff off.
For
When we
heaven's
dug my grandfather's, my folks' house sat on a flat, and then when we built our new house, we went up on the side hill, because when Dad built that house and moved the house in 1950, he wanted a 6-foot basement, and he hit water at 5 foot, so we just poured cement. So we were over a live spring most of my life.
Ah.
And so my wife and I talked it over, and we thought, well, we could spend $50,000 fixing this old house up, and we're still sitting in an old house. No two angles are the same, and it's been added in every direction. Or perhaps we should just build something new. So we went up on a side hill and built one, and when we dug into that side hill, we actually hit some of that coal shale. We're sitting on oil. We know we're sitting on oil, but a friend of mine told me when he was in the Navy, he saw a big map in the superior commanding officer, and it had all of western South Dakota blocked off. Naval Reserve oil. So
Wow.
basically, they know there's oil here, they're not coming after it because the government was saving that for if we ever had a disaster and we needed it. And of course, we're so far beyond that now. And my sister was going with a guy at one time that was a roughneck out in Wyoming. And I said, why don't you bring a crew out here and come drill for oil? He said, why? Well, I said, to get the oil. I said, what are we going to do with it? Well, I said, sell it. He said, you're so far from the refinery, you'd have to, it would cost you money to haul to it. It was like they talked in the 30s when guys sold cattle and shipped them back east. And this guy shipped a carload of cattle. And the people, they charged him for selling them. And they wrote him back and he said, well, the cattle didn't bring enough to pay the bill. He said, you still owe us this much money. He said, well, I got any more money, but I can send you another load of cattle. Kind of the same deal. Okay, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else?
It's lignite coal,
What's that?
lignite coal.
I don't know the difference between them. Oh, Dad did say that the stuff up here, they always said that people that burned that coal, the only time a man and a woman saw each other that winter was when they met at the door, and one was hauling coal in, the other was hauling ash out. That's how poor coal it was.
Yeah.
I've never even tried to burn it. I have a friend up north in North Dakota where they have the burning coal vein. I will show you one more picture. So, how many of you do Burning Lee?
That's grade school.
Any of you know the Quebec's out there?
I'm right behind the girl in the dress
Oh,
with really short hair and then the short.
I can't say their name.
Who are you thinking?
Oh, the older Quebec's, we just talked about them. Donna
Donna.
Quebec. She was a Lee.
Donna Lee.
And anyway, so this is Bernadine. That was my first grade teacher. The guy, little smiling sheriff in the front, that's me. We were a rough looking bunch then.
Can't see you very.
That was at the Sunny Slope School, and that was the same school my dad went to. I
Well,
went
what
there-
year was that, Bob?
Well.
We
I
don't
was in
remember.
6, so 64, probably.
63, 62.
Okay, all right.
About 62.
Yeah,
that one.
yeah, not long ago.
I was the
according to my
freshman,
thoughts.
I would have turned 6 my first grade year, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
So that would have been 64. I was born in 58.
And you were in that, right?
Yeah.
Oh, so it would have been a little later.
But anyway, so I went there through 5th grade, and then they built the new schools and moved the schools in at Denning. And a few years ago, when they were talking about they needed a new school out there and get rid of them old schools at Denning, I was like, what the hell you need a new school for? Well, that school ain't bad, you know, it was a new one I started. Somebody said, well, how long ago was that? I was like, about 40 years. A little older than I thought. Okay, any other questions? All right. For those of you that have hearing aids, you might want to take them off now so you don't have to hear this. So, Bonnie said maybe talk about the music. As I have mentioned to several, my folks had a dance band all for years. And Dad played the drums. Some of the older folks might remember him. He was the guy that had the patch or had a black lens on his glasses. He was the drummer, and Uncle Harry played the saxophone, and Mom played the piano. And Dad said, you know, they traveled the whole country to play for $5 a dance. And he said, you know, never made a dime, but this year had a lot of fun. But I can't remember the last year the folks played. I was married, so, and Dad died in '94. I would bet it was in the late '80s that they played one more dance at Red Owl or something together. But, so I grew up going to these country dances, and of course, you guys are old, most of you are old enough generation to know that when you went to those dances, there was nobody singing, unless they were just singing along with these. There was no microphones, so therefore they wanted loud percussive instruments, and that's why a saxophone, every dance hall had a piano in it, and they were all probably not very well tuned, but Dad played the drums, and the drunker he got, the louder he played. You could always tell how much, because they would play, and then they, you know, for 45 minutes they'd take a break and they'd go outside, have a snort. Nobody drank in the halls, and there was Plainview and Marcus and Red Owl and Union Center. Not kidding, I don't think they ever had a dance hall, but
No, they used to, we're right across the road.
there was. But I can remember in my time, there would be places that would have, there'd be 2 dances or maybe 3 on the same Saturday night through the summer. And when I got old enough to drive, that was a big deal. If there was a dance at Elm Springs, you went to Elm Springs for a while, then you turned around and drove north to Red Owl or to Oakport or whatever, or vice versa. And the Elm Springs dance and Union Center dances, they were the bad ones, that's where all the fights took place. Red Owl, they was a little more quiet, and Marcus. But these kids today, they don't have a clue how much fun we had at those country dances. And we tried to keep them going, and just, you can't get anybody to come, it costs too much to rent. You don't get somebody to come and play. We have a few at Red Owl once in a while. We rebuilt our community hall a few years ago, and it's a really nice facility, and we have had some stuff there, but yeah, it's passing the generations. So maybe I should try to start off, and this is a song that basically, I'd heard a guy did a song I really liked, and I got thinking about it. He basically just telling his family story. And so I didn't just steal his, but I kind of thought of that and emulated what he did. Did one for us. And I haven't sang it for a while, so bear with me. My great-grandfather built stone and sweat and steel. Grandma mostly worked the land. Dad welded for the war, talking tools of destruction. Then returned heaven. All her family still survives. Older brothers moved back home, taking care of kids. Lost words, help them survive. Blood, sweat, and steel washed this land for many years. My family staked out their claim. Lived, loved, and fought and died. Know how hard they tried. Treasured their family's good name. Life back then was tough. Pain, hardship, and suffering weren't no strangers to hard times. Cash was hard to come by. They learned to make do, learn lessons, help them survive. So we get to reap what they have sown for us. We must also do the same. Appreciate and be content what you have. Take some pride in your family's name. Better take some pride in your family's name. Blood, sweat, and tears wash this land for many years. Any horse lovers here?
Isn't everybody a horse lover?
They ought to be. There's a guy named Joel Nelson who wrote this as a poem, and a singer named Wiley Gustafson who set it to music and made the song. It's called Echoes of Lights. I have run on middle fingernail through wheel in the morning, and I've stoned down Coach Road with red shoes warning. I have carried countless errant nights, never found the grave. I screamed for the caissons. I've moved the nation's mail. I've made knights of lowly tribesmen and kings from ranks of peons. And I've suffered pride and arrogance, fighting men for eons. I have prayed among the lodges and the teepees and the roots. I felt the sting of the riding whip, lashes, spurs, and quirks. I am roguish, I am flighty, inbred and lowly, I'm nightmare gone wild I am. Gallant and exalted, stately and noble, I am awesome and grand, I am the horse. I have suffered gross indignity from users and the winners. I felt the touch of kindness from losers and sinners. I have given for the cruel hand, I have given for the kind. I heaved a sigh out of the matters when surrender had been signed. I can be as tough, as hard as steel, as fragile as a flower. I know not my endurance, I know not my own power. I have died with heart exploded beneath your cheering stand. Calmly stood below the hanging noose, vigilante band. I am roguish, I am flighty, inbred and lonely and a nightmare gone wild I am. Gallant and exalted, stately and noble, I am boss and beggar and I am the horse. So I'll run on middle fingernail until the curtain closes. I'll win for you that true crown, wear for you those roses. Towards you who took my freedom, I've no malice or remorse. I'll endure and last forever. I am the horse. The bites. We got any animal lovers? I mean, like radical animal lovers in here? You go stand way in the back. I was up in the Psyche Black Hills camp working for the OV Cross. Now, this is my own piece of country. I was cook and crew and boss. And the afternoon of that there year's coming on, as I recall, me and Summer hit the cap rocking, slid right down into fall. The days were warm and pleasant, but the nights were kind of sharp. I had a snug little cabin to keep the cold wind off my tarp. The aspen leaves was turning yellow and the bees was buzzing around the hive, and it was just one of them kind of days it was great to be alive. So I'm riding along that morning, looking out beneath my hat, thought I'd make a little circle down through Silver Dollar Flat. Maybe bring in some big slick yearling with the address of this farm, because I sure did need to limber up a stiff roping arm. Well, I'm going down through this little kind of open draw, and it comes around the corner and I'm plumb shocked at what I saw. Just pulls up there gawking my eyes, and I'm plumb agog, because this big old brindle he-bear digging ants up out of a log. Well, my heart commenced to pounding, and I couldn't get much air, because I realized I'd never have a better chance to rope myself there. When I'm trying to get my rope tied on, and my horse began to dance, Bruin, he ain't seen us, he's still busy digging ants. So I get her tied on hard and solid, and I said a little prayer. I let out a cowboy war whoop, and we built right to that bear. Well, the beast he heard us coming, and he beat it for the trees there. Weren't no moss a-growing on him, and man, he sure could split the breeze, but I just pulls right in behind him, and like that Bible story told, I cast my bread upon the water, and it come back 1,000-fold. I throwed my slack right at him, and I turned my pony neat, and I heard him grunt and growl as I jerked him off his feet. I started towing him towards the timber, just the way it should be done. Shoot, there ain't nothing to it. Roping bears is lots of fun. Now in the timber, I got busy ducking limbs and brush and such, and I ain't had much chance to check up on my cargo very much. But I'm going to start by breaking him the lead, or at least that was my hope, and I looked back, and here that bear come. Just like that, right up that rope. Things started looking different. So I tells him, okay, Bruin, I'll start paying more attention to this little job I'm doing. I'm going to zig and zag and circle some. Now you just follow me, because you're about to meet your maker on some big old jack pine tree. So I zigged and zagged and I circled, but it seemed to no avail, because next time I checked old Teddy, he's right behind my horse's tail. And about that time, this old pony gave a funny little jump, because that bear commenced to climbing up that rope across his rump. Well, I yelled and I squalled and I hollered and I hit him with my hat. The bear's plumb determined. I yelled and squalled and hollered and hit him with my hat. That old bear, that's terrible. No, the coward's way out's bad in most anybody's book, and that's the only route left open now, so that's the one I took. I just bailed off and checked it to him. Big rock broke my fall. Looks to me, old boy, says, like, you just bought her all. Well, as they went crashing to the timber, I realized, of course, that I just lost a damn good saddle, and the company had lost a horse. And how you supposed to tell it with the boss is standing there? You mean you took a plumb good horse and saddle and you just gave him to a bear? Well, these thoughts and lots more like them was going through my mind as I go limping down that cow trail, trying to leave that wreck behind. The clothes are sort of tattered, and I lost some chunks of hide, but my body wasn't hurting near as much as was my pride. And then I hear this sound. The sound begins to swell back the way that I just come from, and I wonder, what the hell? Then I see my old horse coming. He's stepping lively down the slope. That old bear's up in my saddle, got a loop up. So I handcuffed wrote that. So
back to the history portion thing or whatever, some of the things I thought about when I was up here. Grandpa ran sheep all the time. My dad, his brothers were young. And he got out of sheep just at the right time and into cattle. And I always thought, how come Grandpa's so smart to do that? Well, he wasn't smart, he was lucky. Because when he had sheep, he had kids and he had sheep herders. I got run punchers, he had to run herders. And Dad always said that when he retired, he wanted a job herding sheep, because he said there's no better life just sitting out there on the side of the hill and read a book or whatever, and, you know, twice a day, take them working sheep to water, whatever. It was a great life. But once the kids all grew up and left home, Grandpa got out of sheep, got back into cattle. I wished I could say, the Raymonds, did you know the Raymonds out in that country? Charlie Raymond, I think it was, when Grandpa, he was getting old, and when he sold out, Grandpa bought his cows. Dad said, oh man, you got to really good herd of cows. And you can't really run fast enough to give me a herd of cow. I grew up with it and all the problems with it. Story or song? You decide. You guys. What do you want? Story? Song?
Anybody, story or song?
Sorry.
Both.
Story.
Story.
You know, I was need to check my cat, so I asked my beautiful bride if she'd like to go on a cowboy date. Go along with me for the ride. Well, she hemmed and hawed for quite a while. Finally, she said she would. I saddled her up a nice young colt. He's a little bronky, but he rides pretty good. Just a beautiful day. I even got the first of them gates. It's one of them with a barbed wire loop on top, and that's the kind she really hates. I was riding through them cattle, and I seen one look kind of sick. I said, darling, with your fine help, this is going to work out plumb slick, because they just happened to have a medicine bag with me. So I jumped out and caught him quick. Double hawked him to make it easier on her. Oh, double hawked him to make it fast. Double hawked him to make it easier on her, and I don't think she's going to need a cast for her arm when I kicked her so hard. I don't know why I was giving her good advice. I don't know why she fumbled with that tie rope. Things she said sure weren't very nice. Shoot, I've lost it. It's a fairly new one, so I used to just could memorize these things so easy. Anyway, when we was headed back, she went to open that gate. Yeah, it's the one that she really hates. I couldn't. I was too busy with them bulls we got. We get back to the house. I tried to make the date complete. Offered her a little cowboy romance. I'm talking hugging and kissing, not that cowboy dancing. You know, I got her a glass of tea as she was cooking and cleaning and packing in the wood. She said I don't help out enough around here, and I don't think she appreciates me like she should. Because, you know, she's just a town girl. And we got married and I brought her out to this land. After a lot of hard work and sweat on my part, by golly, she's starting to make a good hand. So I thought it was just wonderful. I thought it all went plumb great. So why is it she always hems and haws so much when I ask her out on a cowboy date? How are we for time?
I don't know.
What time do you want to roll it in? We got a 1:45.
Oh, we got 15 minutes,
Okay.
yeah. So you.
I can go on and on and on. Maybe I can tell you the story about one day, the old preacher was up here, boy, I mean, found the sermon. I mean, he was really giving a good sermon. About that time, poof, right out there in front of the church, the devil appeared. I mean, this church just cleaned up. All gone. Except for one old cowboy sitting out there by himself out kind of the middle. Satan looks at him, he says, "Say," he said, "you know who I am?" Cowboy said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "Do you know what I can do to you?" I said, "I know what you can do to me." He said, "Well, if you know who I am, and you know what I can do to you, you don't seem so scared." "Nah," he said, "I'm not scared." Well, he said, "If knowing all that, how come you're not scared of me?" "Been married to your wife for 40 years. I thought the ladies would love that. Something we lacked on quite a little this year. When I first wrote this, we'd been in a pretty bad drought, and the buildings we used to sit at were down below a hill, and the road came right down off the hill like this, and water would run down if you got any rain. And we were in a bad drought, and it went into raining and just kept it up for a while. And I happened to look out the window, and there was my 3 little blonde-haired boys in their underwear out playing in the mud, water running down. It just kept it up, and I was like, yeah, this is, if it ain't over, it might as well be, because this is going to solve our problem. So I wrote this. The rains that fall are the best of all, and they make a cowboy smile. He slops through the mud as happy as a stud who's been turned with the mares for a while. The rancher putters in the shop amid the slop. He hums a happy tune. You can't make him mad or even very sad. City folks think he's a loon. But now the grass will grow, this he'll know. His cattle will fat and not die, and he might make a dime for all of his time. So he grins as he looks at the sky. City folks don't like rain, they think it's a pain, but as cowboys watch it and grin. Some folks don't know that it makes things grow. God will forgive them that sin. So if you see a man in a hat and he ain't too fat, and he's wearing a great big grin, it means his cattle sold well, or it's raining like hell, or it's setting to raining again. Talking about rain, some more history. So Dad ran onto some older fellow of his generation years back, and they got to talking about the 30s and going through the 30s. And Dad, I thought he said it was 1931, he was night lambing or lambing for a guy over on Red Owl Creek. And he said they did not see the sun for 30 days. And Red Owl Creek, which is doesn't run much water other than in flooding stages, I mean it's just a trickle. It was bank full for 30 days. And he said it rained every day. He said they had teepees, so when you had a lamb, you'd grab that baby lamb in that ewe and you'd put it in this canvas sheep teepees, you know what those are, they're just small, they're square into a frame. Let her get dried off, licked off, mothered up, and then you kick them out, you know, as soon as you knew everything was fine. And he said those little lambs would just get about so big and they couldn't take it, they'd just tip over and die. So he said even in the 30s, they had good years, but the hoppers were low. And this year is probably the closest in my recollection of that, because every time we've had hoppers before, it's been bad. But it usually coincided with a little better year, we'd have some feed. And this year, through the growing season, I don't think we had 5 inches of rain. And it's the driest I have absolutely ever seen, and the hoppers just annihilated everything. But they finally kind of disappeared, so I'm hoping they won't be here next year. Matter of fact, the motorcycle rally, one year during the rally, coincided with grasshoppers. And I know that those bikers, they were really hating the hoppers because they were getting nailed on the road with them. But I wrote my only cowboy poetry limerick. A horde of grasshoppers on the attack, or of motorcyclists all dressed up in black. I much prefer the hoppers over all of the choppers, because next year the hoppers just might not come back. I'm not a big fan of the rally. Another poem, another song. So, when I say shipping time, you guys understand that? So, in this country, there are actually 5 seasons. There's winter, spring, summer, fall, and shipping time. And that's when we ship the yearlings or the calves or whatever. And so what brought this about, I went and I don't necessarily, I used to day work around different ranches, and anymore I just help different neighbors. I did that time too, but I went to help a younger neighbor south of Howes to the set of pins right there on the Grazing Association. And we rode out in the dark and sat there and waited until we could distinguish cattle from soapweeds or whatever, and once we did, we headed back. And that sun was starting to come up, and it was getting that rosy hue to it. And my thought was, oh man, we got a pin facing that. I just was afraid that we was going to have a hard time. But by the time we got to the headquarter corrals, it had gotten enough and it worked great. And I remember the guy that was running the association at that time, I used to carry a little camera and take lots of pictures. And he said, why are you taking all them pictures? So I took pictures of him and, you know, whatever. And I said, well, when I get old, I can look back at these pictures and that's my memory. So I remember things. Of course, now with these phones, I still live, but I find myself doing a lot more videos than I take pictures. But you can only take about so many pictures of a sunset, it seems like. I don't know why they're always glorious. But anyway, all of that set the wheels in motion to ship in time. And of course, most of us in that area, people don't understand ranches because they think these ranches are rich. Well, what they fail to understand is that money's coming from the bank and you've got to pay it back. Shipping time, makes my old heart sigh. Shipping time, I feel just like a kid. In spring, a cowboy loves his life green grass, calves to brand. Summer's full, it gets dang hot, and that's how you make a good hand. In fall, it starts to cool off. Mornings, you wear the coat. Time for the ranch, each year to check his watch, that old banker blow. 'Cause it's shipping time, makes my old heart sing. Shipping time, and I feel just like a king. You're riding at break of day, cool air stings your nose. Horse feels like a tight wound spring, your eyes in turning road. You got good hands to help the work, gather sword and load. Hope you way good, have a good sail, head on down that road. Ah, shipping time, makes my old heart sing. Shipping time, and I feel just like a king. I have to go home and get my songbook out and remember my last words. I had good hands, I did that one. Too many things, ranch is rich. Ain't the money or gold, it's wide open range, freedom friends, we'll ride even when we get old. 'Cause it's shipping time, makes my old heart sing. Shipping time, and I feel just like a king. Yeah, I feel even richer than a king. Thank you. So, we're about there. Any questions? Well, that's been going. Anybody think of any questions they need answered? Oh, I never finished my story on the music, so how I got into music. Our birth parents, I found out, actually were like nightclub entertainers. And so it's kind of bred into us. That grew up with the folks. When I was a little kid, we didn't have tractors and radios. And I remember when I was 7, my dad took me out on the old 8N tractor and showed me how to run it. And they were just hanging across the road, him and my older brother. And so I spent the morning out there. Once I showed him I could drive it, and I just drove where I wanted, and I'd swoop at him, and oh man, I had fun. And got to be lunchtime, and we went in the house. Dad said, "You got that all figured out?" "Oh yeah, Dad. Well, I'm an expert." So he went out after dinner, and he hooked onto a side deliver rake. And he said, "Now you showed me, he rode with me." He said, "You go up this, go all around on this windrow, and then you do it again. And after you've made 2 passes, you got to count. Then you turn around, you go back, and you throw 3 windows together. Can you do that?" Yep, I got that." "Okay," he said, "you do that." And I just happily go along here, and it finally dawned on me one day, that's a rotten thing to do to a little kid, because I thought I was having fun, but hell, he was putting me to work. And so I set out on that tractor, and in order to pass the time, that was Johnny Cash era, and I was a big fan. And I did have a little tape player that I had joined my, what was the ones you sent them a penny, you get all these tapes, and then you had to buy so many more. RCA or something.
Oh, yeah, that's
Columbia Record.
Columbia Record.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I still owe them money
tape of
because,
the month club or whatever.
oh, I got
Yeah.
so many stupid tapes that I hated, and my mom tried to talk me out of it. But anyway, so I would sit out there and I would sing Johnny Cash songs or any other song. And my dad was not a great singer necessarily, wasn't a bad singer, but town being Sturgis, whenever we went to town, many times, especially when it was just him and I remember laying on the seat with my head on his lap, and he would sing on the way home. And he'd always sing Strawberry and Roan, Little Joe the Wrangler, and Hey Hey Snowflake. Those were the 3. But he would sing those songs. So I was around that all my life, and it just was a natural thing. And so when I first started doing this stuff, I didn't sing or play a guitar. My sister started me on guitar many years ago, and I didn't quite get with it. And then I was talking about the Timses there, as we always refer to them as our goofy relations. It's kind of distant, but we're related. And I went over to Frank and John's one time for something. They both had guitars, and they sat there and played and sang, and it was just great. And they said, "Well, you know, 3 chords, you can play about any song," and they got me started. And I just went from there. And so down the road going to these poetry things, what I noticed is when they hired you, they would usually hire a poet and a musician. My economic stuff I learned from my grandfather, if I can do both, I can fill the whole bill, and I get all the money. It was, I'll recite a poem that answers all these things very good. I write to fill the void and absence in my soul, a way to express myself with no specific goal. On the outside chance, perhaps someone else can identify with my thoughts or my feelings. Hear my lost wild cry. But I recite for different reasons. Perhaps I can ease the pain, enlighten, enchant, or humor, but preferably for monetary gain. And that's true.
That's true.
When we went on vacations, we went to poetry things that they might not pay much, but they would give you room and a place to stay or something. And so my kids, they saw a lot of the West, went to poetry things and met a lot of very well-known people. And there was always some big name guy there, a woman, and they were usually friendly. You'd sit around the jam session, BS afterwards. Yeah, I went out to Elko, the big gathering in '89 and '90, and then again in '97. Baxter Black, I don't know how many of you know who Baxter is. I've known this for some time, but it's just come out on Facebook now. Baxter's in hospice at home. He's not doing well. He has Alzheimer's. But I met Baxter many years ago. Mom talked us into going to have a federal land bank dinner, and Baxter Black is going to be the entertainer. Well, Mom had seen him someplace at a Cowboy. And she told us, oh, you gotta go hear this guy, like, yeah, cowboy poetry. Who in the hell wants to hear cowboy poetry? But she talked us into it, and oh, we about died. And the guy's a genius, and he used my hat and part of his deal, you know. And so he was selling a book, so I walked up afterwards to buy this book. And I told him, I said, so seeing you used my hat, I suppose you'll make me a really good deal on this book. He said, I wouldn't dream of charging you a penny more. And it was quite a few years, and he wrote my name, you know, so I ended up, at that time everybody called me Bob. He wrote my name in it, you know, to Bob something. And it was probably 5 years later they had him in Faith for some function, and they asked several of us local poets if we would get up and do something before Baxter. Yeah, you bet. So we was at the stock show when we were going to do this, and my dad was there. And we're sitting in the grandstand, and I happened to glance over and hear Baxter come walking in. He was just standing there at the end of the grandstand watching the rodeo. And I looked at him and looked at my dad, and I said, well, I see Bax made it. He said, really, where is he? And I pointed him out. He said, take me down there, I want to meet him. So we went walking up there, you know, and I was thinking, how am I going to introduce my dad to this guy that he's never met, you know? And when I got about to meet him on, he said, Bob, how you doing? And that guy remembered my name from one meeting. I mean, just a mind, oh, it's such a, and the thing of it is, it's not a sad loss, because he was smart enough to write things down. And so, the lesson I want you to take away from today in history, each one of you has lived history all your life. And you ought to write it down or get somebody to tape it and get somebody to write it, because you've all lived history. My mother was born old time. She was 7 years old in Sturgis when her father died. And her older brothers moved back home to take care of him. And she said built the road, but I gotta believe there was a road there. I'm thinking they rebuilt the road between here and Deadwood, back when they used teams, so this was 1921. And then, of course, Mom, she helped cook and clean for this crew, you know, and said her brothers always had to have a clean white shirt every day. And all these things over the years she told about. And so one day I told her, I said, Mom, you gotta write all your history down. Oh, I didn't do anything. What do you mean you didn't do it? You lived history. Her and Dad had a cafe in Newell in 1940, and it evidently wasn't working out. I don't know if they knew something was coming. We thought we were going to get into World War I or what, but Mom's brother-in-law was teaching welding in Michigan City, Indiana, and Dad left, and he was 4F because he was missing an eye. But he went back there and learned to weld, and left Mom to shut down the cafe and sell all the equipment, but I'm sure they rented the building and then drive on out in their old car, whatever they had, to Michigan City. And she said, you know, I didn't have a lot of money, and she found a lady who had a daughter that needed a ride to Minneapolis, and she said, I will pay for the gas if you'll haul us as far as Minneapolis. So Mom thought, well, that was great. And so I had taken her down to Dr. Rapid, and we went to Perkins for lunch, and Mom ordered a half a sandwich and a cup of soup. That was her meal that day, at noon. And she said, oh, this reminds me of when we made that trip. She said, you know, I didn't have a lot of money. I knew I had to be careful, so every day for my one meal, I'd have a bowl of soup. So she had a bowl of soup. That was her total food intake for a whole day.
Now, you go ask any of these little snowflakes running around down here to go buy even drink a bucket of, you know, but there's a reason they called those people the greatest generation. They knew starvation and privation and doing for others, and they weren't nearly as soft. This country, we've gotten all terribly, terribly soft. But anyway, so you've all lived history, and it's important to somebody that you know, they would love to know the story of your life. So write it down, get it down. Things that you think don't mean nothing. There's somebody out there that would love to read it. Probably me. I read all the time and I love history. Okay, I've went over my time, Bonnie, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. And so, here, as a token of appreciation, Black Hills Arts Council, here's a little gift for you.
Thank you.
You know, and that monetary value for your performance.
Well worth it, well worth it.
Yeah, you think so?
I think so.
Okay. Anyway, let's give Bob a round of applause.
And I'll stick around